As most of you probably know, because I can't stop talking about it lately, I finally finished all 3 of my paintings for Game of Shrooms this year. That's in 1 week, by the way. If you missed my previous videos, you can find them in my Game of Shrooms playlist right up here, where we talk about the Game of Shrooms event itself, what it's all about, how to participate, and things like that. But I mostly share with you essentially my entire painting process from start to finish. We go over how I prepare my panels for painting, the painting itself, and in today's video, I will be sharing with you the final steps that I do to complete my paintings when I'm getting them ready for their send-off. We will be doing some varnishing, I will show you how I photograph my work, and we will also be doing a little bit of designing for some cute little inserts to go inside of the packages with some information for the foragers who find the paintings on the day of the event. So even though the paintings are painted, there's still quite a bit of work to do, but it's fun work. I really enjoy the mild graphic design that I put into the labeling and packaging of my work. It sort of gives me a break from the flowy creative stuff that's involved in making the actual paintings to do more polished and rigid creative stuff, if you know what I mean. It's different enough from painting, but still requires a lot of problem solving, which really scratches that itchy part of my brain. But before we get into today's video, if you are brand new here, welcome. My name is Amy and I'm an artist based in California. I really love sharing my art process with others, which is why I started this YouTube channel. So far, we've done a lot of oil painting and tutorials, things of that nature. So if you find that helpful or interesting in any way, consider subscribing so that you don't miss any of my future videos. All right, let's crack open Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and I just located my Game of Shrooms files from last year. I knew that I had saved them. I had to do some digging, but I found them. And I just realized that I saved them in PSD. Really proud of myself here. Look at me thinking ahead. So we open those up. I don't know if I can actually edit the text in here, so we're gonna have to do some small little edits to change the year. We're not going to be doing a whole lot of designing like I sort of promised. We do need to adjust some of the info on these. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a redesign. I don't know if I want to spend the time. I am pretty happy still with this emblem design, so I think I'm going to keep that. But we do have to print these out, so we're gonna try to figure out what we want to do with that, if we want to use a colored paper to make it a little more fun. I can actually edit this one. So we'll just change the year from 2025 to 2026. We will have to change this from gesso board to wood panel. These are care cards. They're something that I include with every art piece that I sell and gift. They're basically just care instructions for the art on how to display and store the artwork properly. So all we have to do is change the year on the care cards, and instead of looking for the PSD file, because I'm lazy, I'm just going to essentially white out 2025 and overlap that with the year 2026. So now I'm replacing the art labels and the emblems with the updated year and info. Then I will try to pull up the Game of Shrooms instruction cards, which should have been in the same folder as these files, but it wasn't. So we may have to do some digging around for that next. Now we have the care cards, emblems, and the artwork info all updated. What I need to do now is do a deep dive into my computer to try to find those instruction cards. If we can't find them, we'll just have to make a brand new one, so wish me luck. I found it. I thought for sure that I accidentally deleted it or just didn't save it last year, but I had it saved in the wrong folder. I might change the shape of it because we have these big round panels that we've used for the paintings, and I think it would sit nicely in the package if we did a circular card instead of a rectangular card. I might keep this general design, but I'm going to create a new canvas so that we can cut it out into a circle. These are great to include include with your Game of Shrooms art because it gives the finder a bit of instruction on what to do with it when they find it. First of all, you want the person to know that they can keep the art. I also attach a label to my paintings that explicitly says free art because sometimes a person who has no idea what Game of Shrooms is will find your art and not know what to do with it. So this sort of gives them, you know, an idea that this is something that was deliberately hidden, that was intended to be found, and that they are allowed to keep it. Secondly, because Game of Shrooms is a leave no trace event, meaning that if your art is not found, you must go back to the location where you hid your art to retrieve it. These info cards instruct the finder to contact you somehow to let you know that they've found it. So it sort of gives you a better idea if you need to return to your location to collect any unclaimed art. So these are really important and handy to have included with your artwork. All right, we have all of our little designs printed out. I'm going to start with these ones because these will be the easiest to cut because I'm going to be using a straight edge for these guys, and I have a hole punch this side. Now I like to remove this part. Center it as best we can. All right, ready? And we have a little emblem. All right, I think I have to close this curtain. The sun is getting too intense. So these are gonna be a little trickier. I do have this circle cutter. It's like a compass cutter. There is a pin on one side and a blade on the other. And I've had this for a long time. I've never had to replace the blade, but I also don't use this very often, so the blade is still quite sharp. I think I got this from Daiso of all places, and it works pretty well. The only thing is that whatever you're cutting will have a pin mark in the center of it. So I'm gonna have to try to figure out a way to stabilize this onto the circle as I'm cutting without punching a hole through it. So that's the first obstacle. The second thing we have to figure out is where the exact center of this is. And I figure that the best way to do that, since I've already cut these out or printed these out, is tracing it, cutting out the circle out of the tracing paper and folding it in half twice, and then we will have the approximate center. I could just cut these out with scissors, but I know that even if I cut them out very carefully, that it will still kind of look like it's hand cut. And I know there are more important things to worry about, but I like things to look really crisp and clean, and I have this tool, so why wouldn't I use it? So let's give this a shot. Realize I don't actually have to cut out this circle because I can just line up the circle edges by just seeing them through the paper. Glad I realized that before I attempted to cut this out. So there's one fold. That should be perfectly aligned with the center. I'm sure there's a very mathematical way of figuring this out, but this is art math. Okay, so we have our point where the two folds meet in the middle, and that should be our, if not precise center, very close to precise center of the circle. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna very carefully punch a hole right where that is, and hopefully we can sort of use that as a guide to adjust our compass. But I also have another issue, which is how we will stabilize this onto here. So I need something that can stay stuck but also hold down the needle. I got an idea. I have some scrap acetate, mylar, just like transparent sheets of plastic, printable plastic, and I'm thinking I can just cut out a little bit of this, just a little platform. I'll probably even double it up just to be safe because the needle could probably punch through that. So let's cut out another little square of that. You can barely see them. There you go. I'm going to tape these together just so they don't slide around. And I'm gonna just estimate that's approximately the center, but we'll line that up with the compass. And if I'm taping anything down on paper where I don't want the tape to rip up any layers of the paper or the printing, I will take the tape and run it over a piece of fabric so it gets a little bit of lint on it, so it's less tacky and less likely to tear up your paper when you remove it. Plus, washi tape is really gentle on paper anyway. Okay, let's give this a test run. So measure twice. We will pinpoint the hole here and mark it with our pencil. So we have our little spot, and it also kind of creates enough cushion to create an indentation so that you can kind of stabilize the blade. And then with this, I like to rotate the paper as I'm going. And I can see now that it wasn't a perfect point, but we're cutting a little bit into the design, which is not, oops, uh-oh, I think we slid around a little too much. Take two, take two. This one might have to be a little smaller. Let's try this again. We knew this wasn't gonna be perfect, but sort of looking for good enough at this point. Okay, I think that should be fine. I really hope the needle hasn't pierced the paper. Ooh, yikes. Ah, we went through the paper. I think that's okay though. And I may just clean this up with the scissors. You can see a little hole there, barely. It's okay, no biggie. It's actually a lot smaller than it would have been if we just punched through the paper, but I know there's other circle cutters out there. I make do with this one. So there's one. Oh, you know what might be a good idea if we use what if we use like a coin? Let's try that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little relief cut here. Okay, we did better, a little off center, but I'm glad that I gave myself some buffer. We can peel off our coin and voila, no hole punched through the paper. So someone's gonna get the little hole punched one, but I don't think anyone will care. All right, last one. That one turned out much better. Third time's a charm, as they say. So we got all three of our info cards. Put the scraps in the scrap box. You never know when you might need a little scrap of paper. Tracing paper scraps go in a different spot. I almost forgot one thing. Something I like to do is use my round corner punch to make the corners look nice and rounded. I don't know, I think it's just a nice little added touch to anything square. It just softens it and a nice little rounded label instead of a super square rectangular label. I just think it's cute. Plus it's kind of fun to do. So just punch all the corners off of these labels and cards. I use the bigger one for this. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I have a small list of things left to do, and I'm trying to figure out what order to do them in. And since I'm not quite ready to varnish these yet, we're going to attach the labels and the emblems to the backs. They're dry enough to put face down on a protective surface like this silicone mat. So we are going to very carefully peel off this little piece of white contact tape so that we can attach the labels and the emblems to them. I think I'm gonna grab a blade to help me carefully lift the edge of this contact tape so that we can reveal the back sides of these, and I can actually show you the hanging fixture that I attached to the backs of these. So let me get my razor blade. I'm gonna very gently score the edge here, sort of lift that up. And I'm hoping as I peel this up, we'll have a really clean edge. If not, I'll just have to score. Oh my God, this is so satisfying, right? So I have to make sure to get a good angle here. Oh my goodness. That was beautiful. There's our hook, and I inset the hook into the wood so that it's completely flat when you hang it on the wall. You won't have this big bulge at the top if I had just drilled it directly into the flush piece of wood. So really happy with that. Let's figure out our placement for the emblem and the label here. I'm not quite sure where I want to put these. I also want to put in my signature somewhere, so maybe we can do something like this where I have the emblem here and then my signature here, or we can do this at the top and then this here and this here. I think I like it the other way around. Let's think about it and I'll erase these lines on the back. Actually, let's peel the other ones first so we can get those ones ready. Beautiful. And this stuff isn't even fancy art grade anything. This is just like the contact shelf liner that you put into your drawers and cabinets and stuff. So I got a whole box of this stuff from a member of my Buy Nothing group for free, and I'm using it for this now. And the blue one is the driest one since it's the first one that we painted, so we're gonna work on that one first. I think I like this orientation best, where we have the label at the bottom, emblem, signature. Ideally, I would like my signature in the center, but there's really no way to do that symmetrically and have everything fit, unless I do it really small, but I like to sign big. So before I attach any labels or emblems to the backs of these, this is bare wood. We have some acrylic paint. So this is acrylic. The face of this is painted in oil. I didn't actually paint anything on the back side of these, so this is bare wood. So I'm going to paint the back side of this with acrylic medium, and then we'll go back in with a second coat to attach these. I just want to lay down an isolation layer before we attach any paper, because sometimes there can be chemicals in the wood that can leach into the paper and cause it to degrade over time. So having that isolation coat between the wood and the paper will help protect the paper in the long run. So we're gonna wait for that to dry first, and then we will attach our labels and emblems. Once that is all completely dry, we'll go ahead and sign them, and the back sides of these will be good to go. All right, it's the following day and we have our emblems and our labels glued down. And now it's time to sign them. Usually I have to kind of figure out what I want to use to sign, because I like using these deco color paint markers, but sometimes I don't think they're completely necessary. It depends on the surface. This is a gold one that I have. It's really the only one that I have that works right now because my white one is all kind of dried up. But what I really like to use, and what I use most of the time, especially on the backs of my canvases, is just use a pencil. And honestly, it's the most archival thing you can really sign with, other than like actual paint. I honestly like the feel of pencil when I sign anyway, so I think I'm gonna sign with just a really dark pencil. All right, well, here they are. Very inconsistent signatures, but you witnessed them being signed. The last couple things we have to do is varnish and photograph them. I usually wait until after I varnish, but I think I'm gonna do the reverse because I still want to give this guy a little more time to dry because it's still a little tacky. So I'm going to de-lint these with some painter's tape and then photograph them. And that will allow me to get another step completed before we varnish, because I start my work week tomorrow, and the more I can knock out today will be less work I have to do during the week. And then we also have to edit this video. So we're gonna de-lint with the tape, set up my camera so I can show you how I photograph my work, and then we'll pop them into Photoshop and just adjust the colors and everything. I'll show you how I do that. Okay, since I'm still very much a beginner when it comes to operating my DSLR camera, I have notes written down for every time I need to photograph my artwork, because I always forget what the settings are for photographing. So I'm glad I wrote this down. I got these notes and these tips from another YouTube video. They've been really helpful, and I think I do a pretty good job considering that I really don't understand a lot of what this is still. On a basic level I do, but that's why I have it written down, so that I don't forget, and it's less friction every time I need to set this up. It's really helpful. I'll link this video and also the lighting video that really helped me prevent glare in the photos that I take with my artwork, because that was also a really big issue. I'm sure most of you or some of you have experienced some sort of glare or like light texture on your artwork when photographing it, especially if you paint on canvas. Anything that has a textural surface can be really frustrating to photograph when light is involved, of course. I'm going to show you what I use to combat that, and I will also link the video that helped me with this in the description. I'm going to do my best to show you how I accomplish this. Okay, first things first, we are going to set this to AV. I want the image format to be raw and set to JPEG. That's what I use, at least. You might do something different. Other people might tell you to use something different, but this has worked for me so far. Okay, and then we're gonna set the ISO to 100. And then the f-stop is going to be at f11. We are gonna darken the room, and then we need to illuminate the artwork. So I'm going to show you how I set up my lights for that. So for my lights, I have these LED like panel lights. I'm not quite sure what these are called. They're on a tripod stand. We'll probably raise them up a little higher, but it's nice you can really adjust the height of these and position them however you'd like. They already have this filter, softening filter. This is the tip that I got from this YouTube video that I'm going to share with you about avoiding glare when photographing your paintings, is to buy polarizing filters. So I bought a polarizing filter sheet and cut these out to match the shape of my lights. So they slip right in here just like that. And I have a second one for the other light. I only use 2 lights and it works just fine. Along with that, I have a polarizing filter for my camera. I think you can maybe get away with just using the polarizing filters with the lights, maybe the camera filter alone also, but I think it works best if you have a filter for both your camera and your light sources. So that was the advice I was given on that video, because you'll see when they're sort of working together. I'm going to apply this to my camera. I'm going to darken the room and turn on the lights and kind of show you how I adjust the focus of the painting with the lighting to get it just right for the perfect photograph. Okay, so we have the lights on. I have my room light off and my curtains completely closed. When you are using these polarizing filters, it's important that you don't have any other light sources creeping in, disrupting the lighting environment that you've created for your photograph. I'm going to adjust the lights and kind of look at it through the viewfinder of my camera, and I'll show you kind of how I do that with these filters to get the best use out of them. We don't have a lot of glare right now, I'm noticing, because we don't have any glossy varnish on the painting yet, which is usually when it gets really, really glary. I'm not worried too much about the shadows there. I just want to make sure that the artwork is evenly lit. I like the grid if I'm photographing something square, rectangular, and the grid really helps me get the angles right and get it straight on to the artwork. I'm kind of matching up the corners of this square in the center. I'm going to hit this magnifying glass and go somewhere like in the center of the painting. I can see a little bit of glare here where it's hitting some of the shiny spots too. It's not too bad. This is actually pretty good considering. And then I have it on manual focus, so I'm gonna wiggle it back and forth and focus it. And you can really see those little glare spots, those little dots of light where it's coming into focus. So it does kind of help you focus your photograph. We have this glare here. I'm angling the light to the right, and you can kind of see how the glare just kind of disappears there. And I'm kind of moving around, and I think we kind of got everything just right. I kind of want to show you what it looks like when there's a lot of glare. So I'm able to turn this lens on my camera. I have it turned now, and you can see all those little white specks. That's glare from the lighting. And as I'm turning it more and more, those little specks of light just magically disappear. It's awesome. So we're going to take a test shot of this real quick. And we have that really slow shutter, so we get every little bit of light that's here. And so we're going to play back. We're going to zoom in. Yeah, let's stick with that one. On to painting number 2. Wow, that looks very red in the viewfinder. Maybe lighten that up a little bit. I don't want it to be too lit because I can adjust the lighting in Photoshop. And I just want to check the focus on the paintings every time you touch the camera, basically, because you could just nudge it just enough where it's out of focus and you're losing a bit of detail in your photos. And that's why I have the shutter set to a timer, like a 3-second timer. That way, once I tap it, my hands are not touching the camera while it's taking the photo. That's another tip that I got from that YouTube video. Let's go ahead and shoot this one here. Beautiful. I might go back and reshoot the blue one. I think it was a little bit too dark. Yeah, I think that looks much better. And we'll adjust the colors in Photoshop. This looks way too red. It doesn't look accurate at all. It's nice to kind of like scroll around and find like a good spot where there's a lot of contrast to tighten up the focus there. I think we got it. And that's that. So here we are back in Photoshop, and since these photos were shot in RAW, they automatically open into the Camera Raw filter. The Camera Raw filter allows you to do a lot of fine-tuning when it comes to color and value, which gives us the best chance at matching these photos as close to the actual paintings as possible. I also like to have the physical paintings next to me while I'm editing so that I can accurately match the colors and values. First of all, we have the color scales here. We have hue, saturation, and luminance. We're going to start with the hue because you can lean the red a little more warm or a little cooler. We're kind of right in the middle here. I think we're going to dampen the saturation just a little bit so that I can get a sense of the actual color. So for the red, it's going to be a little more desaturated because the colors are going to be more vibrant digitally than they are in real life. Sometimes it's the opposite when I photograph. Some colors photograph more true to color and some don't. It just really depends. But this one photographed a little bit more vibrant than the actual painting. So, you know, we're trying to shoot for accuracy here. So I think I'd say that this is about right. So here we are with the blue. We're gonna bump that up a little bit more. I think that looks just about right. Okay, we're not gonna get it perfect, so I think this is fine. On to green. This one actually looks pretty good. I think in real life, it looks a little more warm, so we are going to adjust the hue of the color. So we are going to tweak it just a little bit more to the warmer end of the spectrum. And I think, yeah, -11 is where we're supposed to be, and then we're going to adjust the lighting a bit. You can zoom in, of course. You can see all the lint that I missed, but we're gonna clean that up when we are done with this. I think these are fine the way they are. Let's kind of take a second glance. You also have like more lighting adjustments up here. There's a lot you can really modify, and I'm just kind of leave it here. All right, so we're gonna select all 3 of these and open those up. We are gonna do a little bit of editing here as well. First, we are going to do a little bit of digital lint removal. I try not to do too much of that. I obviously didn't do a very good job shielding the lint while my paintings dried, but when I edit my photos, especially for listings in my shop, I want the photo to look as close to the original artwork as possible so that people know exactly what they are buying. But since these artworks are being given away, I don't mind going to town on the lint removal, and who knows, I may make prints or stickers of these images in the future, and it'll be nice to have them cleaned up a bit. Just a couple more spots, but I think we are good. Let's move on to the next one. And we're gonna zoom in here. I know we got tons of it here. This poor guy was left on my table. These little pieces of lint aren't really that visible in person. It's really showing up a lot in the photograph. We got a little fingerprint here I noticed too. I think that's when I was tapping it to see if it was dry, and it definitely was not even close. We're not gonna get every single one, but good enough is good enough sometimes, you know? Someone told me that once, and I like to remind myself that if I'm getting really particular about something, and it's kind of helped with my perfectionist sensibilities. Good enough is good enough sometimes, especially when you're making YouTube videos. I've realized that, you know, you can't have every shot be perfect. Sometimes it's impossible to go back and reshoot some things. You're gonna have to just live with it, and that's okay. I'm learning to be more candid as I'm creating videos. This is also a good technique if you are experiencing glare. Most photo editing programs should have a tool like this to remove imperfections, but it can definitely get rid of light glare in photos as well, so it could be a good tool to use for that too. All right, on to number 3. And we've got a little bit here as well. Alright, next thing's next, and I'm going to crop these into squares and save them in a couple different formats. One will be the painting sort of suspended on a blank background, and the second version will be a circular PNG file for my website, prints, stickers, etc. Alright, so we have the green, the blue, and now the pink. And believe it or not, we are finally ready to varnish. I like to wear nitrile gloves for this, just in case I get any on my hands. I also will lay down this piece of cardboard to catch any drips. And to make cleanup a bit easier, I like to use a little dish wrapped in foil to pour my varnish into. The varnish I like to use for my works on panel is Gamvar Satin, so that is what we are using today. And as an added tip, I like to poke a small hole into the seal of my new varnish bottles to make dispensing small amounts of varnish a bit easier and less messy. Our little painting pedestals are back. If you've watched my earlier videos, you'll recognize these. I just taped the paintings to the tops of these empty containers with a few pieces of painter's tape. It holds surprisingly well, and this actually helps me apply the varnish to the paintings completely without having to handle the actual panel. For applying my varnish, I find that a cheap little sponge brush works the best. I've tried other brushes in the past, even the fancy Gamvar varnish brush, sorry Gamblin, and I just keep coming back to these. The sponge just has more of a controlled and even application that I like. It's sort of like using a felt tip marker, if that makes sense. I never feel like I'm drenching the paintings with varnish like I've experienced with using regular brushes. Maybe that's just user error, but this is just my preference. So I'm applying a thin coat to each of the paintings, pulling the brush in a variety of directions to make sure that I cover every bit of the painted surface with the varnish. Then, after each painting is coated, I place them into a cardboard box to keep little floating pieces of dust from settling on them as they dry. And now I'm happy to report that our paintings are officially finished. I'll be packing these up as soon as the varnish has completely cured, but here's what you can expect in each package. We have the painting, of course, signed and dated on the back with a special edition Game of Shrooms emblem, care instructions, a sticker, and instructions on what to do if you find this painting on Game of Shrooms Day. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for sticking this one out. I know it was a long one, but if you're in the Southern California area on June 13th, 2026, you just might be able to find one of these mushrooms out in the wild. Just be sure to locate me on the artist map at yumfactory.com/project/Game of Shrooms, and also look out for my Instagram stories at AmyWiseArt for additional clues on where these will be hidden. That is it for me, you guys, so thank you so much for watching and happy foraging.